is Friday Night Lights with Brandy Flores. Brought to you by Outdoor Living Concepts, your outdoor cooking specialist.
Good evening and welcome to Friday Night Lights. I'm Brandy Flores. It's week 3 of this shortened 5-game season, which means we're more than halfway through. We're starting to get a feel for who will be at the top of each division at the end of the season. Plus, a couple of rivalry games were on the slate this week. In fact, we'll start tonight with the Cook Street rivalry between Xavier Prep hosting Palm Desert. Palm Desert is the team to beat this year in the DEL, off to a strong 2-0 start. But Xavier knows the importance of this game. They're 1-1 on the year and looking to improve. Unfortunately for the Saints, tonight wouldn't be that night. From the opening kickoff, Palm Desert dominated the game. It was the usual suspects, quarterback Daniel Carter organizing the air attack and even punching it in a couple of times himself. And of course, running back Hani Joe had a couple of touchdowns on his own. And Palm Desert rolls to win 52-0. The Aztecs will try to continue its undefeated season next week, hosting Rancho Mirage. Now we'll turn to our other DEL matchup tonight, Rancho Mirage hosting Shadow Hills. Both teams are 1-1 on the year. Shadow Hills coming off a loss to Palm Desert, while Rancho Mirage is coming off a convincing win. Let's see who will prevail tonight. Rancho Mirage exploding out of the gate. Rattlers quarterback Cesar Vela doing it all in the first quarter, throwing for 2 touchdowns and scoring another with his legs. This game would get out of hand pretty quickly for the Knights, and it was all Rancho Mirage for the rest of the game. The Rattlers win with the statement win 56-0. Here's what Rattlers coach LD Matthews had to say after the game.
This is the last time this group of 16 fine young men are going to be able to suit up and play in this stadium. So our kids really were very focused this week, very excited about the opportunity to play for the last time, and went out and executed our game plan.
The Rattlers will travel to Palm Desert next week, so hopefully they can carry this momentum into that game. Now we'll turn to the DVL. 3 games on the schedule tonight. We'll start with Cathedral City hosting Yucca Valley. The Lions coming off a win last week. Meanwhile, it's the first game for the Trojans. They had a player and coach test positive for coronavirus a couple weeks ago, but they've been cleared and are looking to open their season on a positive note. Cathedral City would take an early lead after quarterback O'Shea Wallace takes it in himself. The rest of the first quarter would be quiet. Right before halftime, Wallace throws a deep bomb and it hits, giving the Lions a 13-0 lead at halftime. Then in the third quarter, Wallace again hits on the deep ball. That puts Cathedral City up 19-0. They would add a couple more scores and take the win 29-0. A solid win for the Lions, who improved to 2-1 on the year. Meanwhile, Yucca Valley starts their season 0-1. Lions coach Richard Lee was happy with what he saw from his team tonight.
You know what? The most important thing with these kids is they're improving. I knew we were a better football team than we showed in our first game against Coachella. They're a good football team, but I knew we were a better football team than when we showed up. So now kids are starting to learn a little bit more. Some of my kids that have been around, like I said, we have some really good football players. They're starting to play up to the potential, so things are starting to come around a little bit. I like it.
I agree with Coach Lee. The Lions have definitely turned it around since their first game this season. We'll move on now to Desert Hot Springs hosting 29 Palms. The Golden Eagles coming off a loss in a non-league game last week. The Wildcats also lost last week in their first game of the season, so both teams are looking to get a win. 29 Palms would control this one wire to wire, taking the lead early on and never giving it back. The Wildcats score 69 points, the highest number for any team tonight. A dominant showing for 29 Palms, who controlled the game the whole way. They ended up winning 69-6. 29 Palms improves to 1-1 on the year. Meanwhile, Desert Hot Springs falls to 0-2. And now to our third and final DVL game of the night, Indio hosting Desert Mirage. Indio coming off a tough loss in their first game of the year. And for Desert Mirage, it's their first game of the season, so they're looking to get out of the gate quickly. And talk about a bounce-back victory for Indio. The Rajas had the Rams running game totally locked down. There was no getting past Indio's defensive line for the Rams this evening. They would go on to completely shut out Desert Mirage 48-0. The standout player tonight for Indio was Patrick Zamora Jr., who scored a couple touchdowns, contributing to the win. Indio improves to 1-1 on the season. Meanwhile, Desert Mirage starts out 0-1. Now, we did have 2 Thursday night games this week, one in each league, and in the DEL, Palm Springs traveled to La Quinta for the Mike Gates game, and it's named after a teacher who taught at both schools who unfortunately passed away in 2010 after a battle with cancer. So, to honor his memory, both teams battle for the Mike Gates Lights Award. La Quinta took the win last time these teams played each other, but Palm Springs is one of the most dominant teams in the DEL this year. And last night, the Indians were not messing around. Palm Springs shuts out the Blackhawks 56-0. That is the first time in 10 years that Palm Springs has traveled to La Quinta High School and won, marking the start of a new era. Palm Springs now improves to 2-1 on this season. And in the DVL, Coachella Valley traveled to Banning. It's Banning's first game of the year. Meanwhile, Coachella Valley is off to a hot 2-0 start. Unfortunately for the team, Banning High School did not allow any fans to attend the game. Coachella Valley is looking to be one of the strongest teams in the DVL this season. They traveled to Banning and absolutely owned, getting the win 61-27. Coachella Valley is now undefeated so far this season with a clean 3-0 record. Their quarterback, Hugo Sandoval, is only a sophomore and has been performing very well so far this season. Against Banning, Sandoval threw for 263 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's definitely going to be one to watch for these next couple of years. So there you have it, all the week 3 action. Let's recap all the scores in case you missed any. All but one of tonight's games were complete shutouts, with the losing team scoring 6 points combined tonight across the board. Domination from all of tonight's winners. In the DEL, Palm Desert rolls over Xavier Prep in the Cook Street rivalry game, making them the kings of Cook Street. The Aztecs are now the top team in the DEL at 3-0. Rancho Mirage with a statement win against Shadow Hills. And on Thursday night, of course, Palm Springs handled La Quinta easily, winning that game 56-0. Now let's recap tonight's DVL scores. 29 Palms handles their business against Desert Hot Springs. Cathedral City cruises to a win against Yucca Valley. Indio gets the win against Desert Mirage. And in last night's game, Coachella Valley traveled to Banning and left with a convincing win. They're now 3-0 atop the DVL. Week 3 is in the books. We've seen all the scores, so let's break down the action. Joining us now is Kevin Pillow. He hosts a high school sports blog called Prep Sports Net. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Brandy, it's a pleasure. Thank you for letting me join you here on Friday Night Lights.
Of course. Let's jump right into it. Now that we're in week 3, we got to get a grasp for all of these teams across the Coachella Valley. I want to know these standout players so far this season. My personal standout player is O'Shea Wallace, a quarterback for Cathedral City Lions. I mean, he's a dual threat, amazing defensive back as well. And even though he's a junior, he's really done a great job leading the team, putting them on his back. And besides that first game against Coachella Valley, they've been pretty successful so far. So now, Kevin, who's your standout player?
Hey, going into last week's game against Indio, I was right there with you with O'Shea Wallace. He comes from a great pedigree of football players. I got to see his brother Orlando play back in the day. But I was expecting a little bit more out of him, but he's kind of shared the wealth against Indio. But the guy who's standing out tonight for me and is probably going to shine for the rest of the season is Ty Hirschberger of Rancho Mirage from the DEL. He had a great night, doubled up his touchdown total for the season with 2 more tonight. He came into the game with 200 yards passing. I think he's a fantastic player and perfect for that Matthews offense.
No, for sure. And I mean, before the season started, we didn't know if high school football was going to happen or whether it was not. Ty was said that this was going to be his breakout season. And I think that is exactly what we're watching. So good for him. I mean, we love to see all the action, right? So now you were at the Indio game this evening. They had a tough loss last week, but they definitely bounced back this week. Shut out Desert Mirage. What did you see? What was the biggest difference tonight?
Game-changing on the offensive line. Talk with Coach Scott Gilbert after the game and before the game about some of the changes he made after the Cathedral City game. And the biggest one was he moved Gael Guzman and Kevin Garcia to right and left tackle respectfully to help block on the offensive line. And it showed tonight a lot more production out of Patrick Zamora and, of course, the standout sophomore Dominic Moran. I thought he had a great game in the second half last week and the second half this week. So changes on the offensive line. Flip it, those same guys also did really strong on the defensive side of the ball. Were able to control Leon Tisok from Desert Mirage tonight. We had a great game, but still were able to kind of control him on the outside.
Yeah, definitely such a big bounce back. And I mean, good for them to be able to make those adjustments really quickly, honestly. And now we'll talk about Desert Mirage a little bit. They didn't seem to have a lot of guys on the sideline, which I think showed because they struggled today, obviously.
Yeah, and I talked with some of their coaches. I think one of the things that they're struggling with, of course, is Coachella Valley Unified School District made the choice not to go back to in-person learning. So that's kind of affecting their on-campus presence with student athletes. But Coach Sandoval is optimistic that he will continue to grow this season and into the fall next year and continue to produce in this program. It's a good team that produces some great standout running backs and kind of finesse players. Tasoka had a great game tonight. Maybe not the yards it showed, but he kind of took over this offense. So watch out for Leon. I think he's going to be a player to watch for in the future.
Oh, definitely. We will be watching now. And everything, it's kind of a rebuilding period this spring ball season for most teams this year. So now we want to move on because, there were so many shutouts tonight in the DEL, in the DVL. Do you think that has to do with going back to your point of not having as many on-campus participation, whether it be at schools or practices?
It's funny, as I was listening to the news reports coming into the sports tonight, and I think the weather also plays a factor into it. This is different. We're used to going from triple-digit weather into a little bit cooler from August into November. I think that might have a little bit of factor into it. It's different weather. The kids are kind of thrown off. They're not used to being in full pads playing tackle football in the spring. They're used to passing leagues and some spring ball. The other thing, too, is you're cramming 3 weeks of practice. You're cramming passing league, spring ball, and Hell Week into 3 weeks of practice prior to this season, and then going right into the lines, then, so to speak, for this season. So I think some of that shows with the lopsided scores we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I didn't think about that, but the weather is always that secret little factor that just kind of plays in the back of your mind. I think about it every time I leave California and I come back. I'm like, why would I leave? But we'll see a lot of hopefully new changes. Hopefully we'll see a regular season this August. But hey, with this shortened season, I guess we'll take all the action we can get. Thank you so much for joining us, Kevin. We really appreciate your time. We're going to take a look now at the schedule for week 4 in the DEL. We start on Thursday with Palm Desert hosting Rancho Mirage. Then on Friday, Palm Springs hosts Shadow Hills, and La Quinta is set at home against Xavier Prep. Now for the DVL, another Thursday night game, Desert Mirage hosting Desert Hot Springs. Then on Friday, a trio of games, including several rivalry games. 29 Palms hosts Yucca Valley in the battle for the Bell. Coachella Valley hosts Indio in the Bell game. And in Cathedral City hosting Banning. Well, thank you so much for joining us. A great week 3 of high school football. Congrats to all of tonight's winners. Again, so awesome that we're even getting a season, even if it's a little shorter than normal. Well, I hope that you'll join us again next week. And until then, I'm Brandy Flores. Have a good night.